Good morning, all.
Good morning.
Good morning. We've gotten your proposal on Article 10 and Article 11. Is there any change to the Article 10 portion of it from the one you made on June the 24th?
No, there's no substantive change on Article 10, but we wanted it to be looked at in conjunction with Article 11, which is the supplemental pays. And if you want to go over that, I'd be happy to do that right now.
Okay.
So Article 10 is the same substance as was found when we did the proposal responding to your proposal of 5/19/15 at 9 a.m. So there's no change there. It's basically copied and pasted the same amount. Or the same text was copied and pasted, but we wanted it to be looked at in conjunction with the additional Article 11 of supplemental pay.
Okay.
On our supplemental pay, what we're proposing is on Section A, certification pay. The certified paramedic is currently $75 per month, and we're proposing to leave that for the first 3 years of the contract, and then move that up to $100 per month for the last 2 years of the contract. As you saw in our last wage proposal, I believe we added that last time, so it would be in essence an approximately 4-year and so whatever months contract.
Mm-hmm.
Everything else is a status quo with regard to certification pay as found in the old contract. On Section B, assignment pay, we're proposing that on the operations assignments, the hazmat pay would remain status quo at $50 per month for the first 3 years of the contract, including this not full. The first year we understand is not a full year, and then on the last 2 years of the contract, it would go up to $75 per month. On the ambulance duty, what we're proposing is to we had consolidated, I think, something. It's not what was status quo, but instead of assigned to ambulance, we actually did ambulance duty where you would be paid per shift worked. And we had proposed $25 per shift worked, and we've changed that to the first 3 years of the contract, and we move up to $35 per shift work for the last 2 years of the contract. The temporary duties and the higher classification pay remain as they were in the old contract. The education incentive pay is what we have originally proposed. We did not include the grandfather provision that you had proposed.
So people would actually lose money under that. If we accepted that proposal, they would actually lose educational incentive pay that they currently get.
Some people would most likely lose it if they didn't have the associate's degree, but we would probably have more people making more money and create a bigger incentive for people to complete their degrees, whether it be an associate's, bachelor's, or master's degree.
Well, when you say we'd have more people making more money, I mean, you're not proposing changes to any of the rates from the current contract, right?
With regard to education incentive pay, with the costing that we provided to you, the education incentive pay, in fact, it's more than the amount that's currently budgeted. There's a surplus amount that's already currently budgeted, so we're not taking money away from the firefighters. In fact, we're giving them some money. It's just the way that it's allocated is different. It creates an incentive for firefighters to achieve their degrees.
Excuse me. Okay, so it is an increase over the current contract.
Yeah, it is an increase. And basically what I'm saying is we're not taking any of those monies away. It's just going to be, because of the way we've incentivized the education incentive pay, the allocation is going to be different. And it actually adds money to the value. There's new monies involved in the education incentive pay.
The current contract pays $71 for an associate's degree, $124 for $135 for a bachelor, and Looks like 155 for a master. $71 per month for an associate. 135 for a bachelor,
Right.
and it looks like 170 something for 171 for a master's.
Right, so we're upping those pays and what?
Okay.
So, yeah, those are going up,
Okay. Kiddo.
okay?
And what about the expense and textbook reimbursement?
I
looks-
was, let me look. I thought that we may have covered that, and I was actually looking at that before we came over here. Because that was not part of the, I thought we had already covered that part, because in the old contract, with regard to the
Hold up, hold
supplemental
up.
pays.
Current contract, not old contract, current. You're talking about
I'm
the
sorry,
current
no,
contract.
no, it's the old contract. That
Current
that
is what we're
contract,
under right now.
the contract was canceled.
No.
And we're under a court order that we've agreed to
Current.
extend. So at any rate, our position is that it's the old contract that was canceled, and we're negotiating a brand new contract from the ground up, and we have.
You are negotiating a brand new contract from the ground up.
Right.
However, under the court order that you signed, the old contract continues in effect. So it still is the current contract. And I don't want us to get hung up on nomenclature.
That's right, but we're negotiating a brand new contract.
We are.
So that's, to me, that's the old contract. We're not under that anymore in our.
Okay, we
the
just
reason-
understand
that's
that
the
every
reason that
time
we're
you say
here.
old contract, we're hearing current contract.
Okay,
Okay? And every time we say current contract, if you want to hear old contract, that's okay too.
that's what I'm hearing. So at any rate, I lost my place.
We were talking about educational incentive pay and whether or not you were going to continue the policy of expense and textbook reimbursement.
Oh, I thought that we had covered that because in the old contract, it wasn't part of the actual supplemental pay or the add-on pays. That may have been in the supplemental benefits, TA, and if you allow me real quick. I thought we had covered that reimbursement part.
In the supplemental,
It may be in the,
that would be, we TA'd Article 14 on, I don't see it there,
Okay.
Roxy. So you weren't necessarily intending to eliminate that?
we weren't intending to eliminate it. We'll definitely consider a counter proposal that included that.
Okay.
And I'll look, because I thought maybe we had covered something along those lines in a previous tentative agreement already. Because it was not included on the supplemental pays of the old contract. So I thought maybe we had reorganized it a different way.
Okay.
What, do you know where you obtained that from the old contract?
It's on page 16.
Oh, on the education incentive pay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Where is it going?
The second paragraph of section 2, is that what you're talking
It's,
about?
yeah, the addition of other compensable areas of study under this section shall not expand the practice of payment of expenses or provision to other areas of study as presently provided for an associate degree in applied science for fire science at Del Mar College. And our provision
Okay.
limits it to that.
Okay, we'll consider the counter proposal on that.
Okay.
That probably would not have been covered in the education, or the supplemental benefits. That may have been training materials is what I was thinking about.
Now, it looks like you've also eliminated the section on the performance award. Was that intentional, or?
Well, with the performance award, it's $150 lump sum given to each firefighter every year, but there's no performance evaluation involved with it. As I recall, our discussions were that it was some type of, it was an attempt to maintain a Christmas bonus kind of deal.
Something like that.
Okay.
But I'm just trying to ascertain if you're purposely proposing to eliminate it.
At this point, yes, our proposal does not include that.
Okay. And you've also eliminated the section about keeping bi-weekly pay periods.
I do believe we have talked about in the working hours, and I do recall talking about having bi-weekly pay periods already. We're not intending to eliminate that, and I thought it was already covered, and that is how the city works with bi-weekly pay periods.
Okay, hang on a second. I'm looking at the TA on work hours. The TA doesn't have the bi-weekly pay periods right
Okay.
now, but so you're not necessarily. It
We're
does
not-
talk about the work week and duty hours, but it doesn't talk about pay.
Somewhere in the
Periods.
TAs that we have done, there's a mention of 26 pay periods, which would indicate bi-weekly pay periods, and I'll find that and
Okay.
pinpoint it out. But
Okay.
the intention is not to create a different kind of pay system. The entire city works on a bi-weekly pay system, and the only other thing is, if I don't ever see it changing, but if it did, we would probably need an ability to be able to change along with the whole city if that was a management decision that was made at some point.
Well, okay. We'll look at that and address that in the counter. So the only thing that you're taking away, pay-wise, that you currently provide, you're taking away the grandfathering of the people that don't have an associate's degree. And you're eliminating the performance award that's paid in November of each year.
Yes, with the education incentive pay proposal, we are adding more value to the people that do have the degrees on there.
Okay. Okay.
And we're adding additional value to certain, the assignment and the assignment pays and certification pays that I mentioned previously, that we
Okay.
went over.
Okay. And the only other article currently that I have that you have not made a counter on now, well, actually two of them, Article 2 definitions, and I assume you're just waiting till the end to
Yes.
look at that. But also Article 38, Association Health and Benefit Trust. You told me I could expect a proposal on that today. Is one forthcoming?
There will be in the afternoon.
Okay, very good.
Now, on Article 2, you had sent me over an article, a definitions article, but it wasn't meant as a proposal, just so we could kind of keep a running list of what was going on. So I understand that your Article 2 that you sent me is basically the first, is it the first or second? I guess the second
It's actually the
proposal.
second, maybe even the third. Hang on a second, I'll tell you for sure.
Because I know you did an initial definitions. We agreed to table that till the very end to capture all the definitions that we needed to encompass for whatever agreement we
It's actually my
finalized.
third, and I'm just
Okay.
adding stuff to it. You might give it a look because I've tried to capture everything. that's in the current contract. You might look and see whether you agree that I'm doing a good job. You know, there's some things like I don't understand, like we've defined city manager, but I put it back in there. I mean, I think.
Well, I was gonna ask, was that in the old contract?
Yeah.
Okay. But I don't recall, you know, why that would need to be in there.
I don't either, but I mean, we, you know, we've defined the fire chief,
Okay.
so, you know, and supervisor, and, I mean, we defined a lot of things that, you know, I didn't, but, you know, look at it, I mean,
Okay.
we don't have to, I mean, if it makes everybody feel better to have those definitions in there, the one that I would point out to you is I define classification to mean the same thing as rank.
Yes.
And so that we wouldn't have to say classification and rank every time we talked about it.
Okay.
Okay.
So you've sent me that counter proposal on Article 2, which is
Mhm.
definitions, a counter proposal on Article 6, which is management rights.
Right.
The only difference I see is in those last two paragraphs.
Yeah, I mean, let's just go over our proposals real quick. And let me see. Article 2, we really kind of talked about. Article 6, I'm trying to keep the past practice language in with prevailing rights. They are bookends, and that they really go together there as opposed to management rights, I think. All I've done on management rights is just reiterated what you've said at the bargaining table repeatedly, which is that while your exercise or retained management rights are not subject to grievances, you won't use a claim of management rights to refuse to arbitrate a grievance that alleges a violation of a specific contract provision. And so that's all I've done, is just basically reiterate what you've said. I really think we ought to be able to TA on the basis of this on management rights, and I would really like to do that today if possible.
And let me ask you, on the deletion of any other forum,
The reason I did that was because, you know, I mean, if we claim, you know, we can't claim contract violations in another forum. We have committed ourselves to alleging contract violations through the grievance procedure. If we're going into another forum, we're alleging a violation of a statutory right.
okay.
Be it the duty to bargain in good faith or some provision of the Civil Service Act, and that's the only reason I took out forum. It just really is unnecessary. If we file a lawsuit, you know, we're filing a lawsuit about a violation of something other than the contract.
For instance, something that would require, that would be a mandatory subject of bargaining, such as what if we change the wage, the base wage?
If you change the
something like
base
that,
wage,
without negotiating.
that's a contract violation.
Okay,
You know, as long as we have a contract.
okay,
And so we would, if you know, fail to pay us the wages that the contract requires, we would file a grievance, okay? We might go into court to seek a temporary restraining order or something in aid of, that's called a boys market or reverse boys market injunction proceeding. You know, only in aid of the arbitration process itself, okay? If you refuse to pay wages that are called for by the contract, or you refuse to pay an assignment pay that's called for by the contract, our remedy is a grievance.
Okay.
If, on the other hand, you're violating a particular statute, and you know there are provisions in 143, obviously, provisions in 142, 141 of the local government code. There's all kinds of statutes you can violate too that pertain to you, but we would have to pursue those in court. Okay, so eliminating other forum doesn't really, you know, mean anything. I mean, if we sue you in court, you're going to have to respond, even if it's to claim immunity.
okay.
Okay.
What would happen if a specific term says we're going to follow this specific provision of 143? Would that fall under a grievance procedure or a lawsuit?
You know, at that point, I would say that that's a grievance.
Okay.
If you
Because it's a
have
specific
contractually
contract
agreed
provision.
to follow, you're right that it's a statutory violation too. But, you know, our preferred remedy is to arbitrate
Okay.
where possible.
Okay.
And in fact, a lot of my bargaining units, they file grievances sometimes when they're clearly statutory violations, and that's a mistake that they just make. But so I really don't see any significance in eliminating that. And on the other hand, if I left it in there, I was worried that you might interpret that to be we gave up our right to sue for statutory violations or something. You claim, well, it's a management right. Well, no, it's a statutory violation. Well, it's a management right, and you can't even sue us. That's what I was worried about.
Okay.
Okay. So I really hope we can agree on that one. Article 12, I've only made, I just have to tell you with regards to callback overtime, we're asking the city to retain the status quo. And the status quo is to pay us for callbacks outside our regularly scheduled work hours. And there are two things that I want to ask you to consider about that. The first is that the police are paid for all hours outside their regularly scheduled hours of work. And the city has not even proposed, to my knowledge, a change in the current police negotiations. So there is a question of a difference in treatment between police and fire that we don't understand. And the second thing that I want to point out, actually there are three things I want to point out. The second thing I want to point out is that I think that the city, in trying to alter that, is fixing a problem that is ceasing to exist. You have high overtime costs right now. You've just hired a 42-member class, and you just announced a new class with an additional, possibly as many as 40 additional officers. If you get all of those new firefighters on board, overtime is going to go down dramatically. Oh, the overtime that you're paying right now is simply a function of the fact that you are short-staffed, as you are in other departments as well. That problem will go away. It is a very different thing to ask a firefighter to make less in overtime because they're not working as much overtime than it is to ask them to make less in overtime while working the same amount of overtime. And so we're asking you to consider maintaining the status quo on that. And the third thing I want to say about that is I honestly believe that it doesn't matter what this team agrees to at the table. If we mess with that overtime, I don't think the bargaining unit will pass the contract, come what may. I think that that's a deal killer for our membership. So we're asking you to keep the overtime as it is, and I don't think that that's an unreasonable request. Again, to the extent that overtime is costing you a lot of money now, you have taken the necessary steps to ameliorate that problem. So you're trying to fix something through this proposal that's not really what's broken. And you've taken steps to fix what is broken, which we very much appreciate, by the way. I think you've done a good thing for you and us by doing what you're doing. So that's Article 12. The next one is what, Article 35? We've covered 2, 6, 12, 35 is the last one. Article 35, that's where we've got the past practice language. We're keeping it there. I have narrowly tailored it. I think it very clearly protects only established past practices, but it does protect them. I put in your language about any defenses available to you to a past practice claim that are available under law, you can still allege, so that your language is in there as well. I do think that this is a fair proposal. I think that this, in the context of the additional language that we provided you both in management rights and complete agreement, which is an entirely new provision in this contract, we have to maintain the protection of this past practice provision. I again point out to you that the police do have a maintenance of standards provision. They don't call it that, they call it existing conditions, but it's the same thing. And they haven't even been asked to consider changing that. I think that This is another one that the city ought to be able to agree on today, because we have more than met you with regards to the concerns you've expressed about management rights and complete agreement. And I really think we need to get past these and get on to the real issues that still divide us, which are, pay and benefits. I think we can make progress there too. I have not made a proposal today about EMS, but I did make a proposal, the last proposal on that, on the 24th. I think there again, we have met the city, and EMS is something we ought to be able to TA on the basis of the union's last proposal. I think that we have, with the provision and the agreement for people not to relinquish currently held certifications, with you having 80 people potentially coming on in the next year, I think again, you're working on a problem that you've already fixed, and I think that we've given you the coverage you need until your solution gets into place. And we are more than willing, of course, to meet with you at any time, even after a new contract is entered into, to talk about, reshaping the firefighter 2 rank or whatever that might be a longer term solution to an EMS situation. But, I really think that these are things that we ought to be able to, get done today. And that is the past practice complete agreement, management rights, and EMS. I think it would go a long way towards getting us to where we need to be. I also think, Roxy, and I just need to say this, that we're getting down to the end game of the contract.
That's right.
And we've only got a few things left. And we need to get this contract negotiated within the 6 sessions that we have left, that we currently have scheduled. If we can't get it done in those 6 sessions, I don't think another 6 sessions are going to help us at all. I think we just have to get it done at this point. And if you put your last proposal on the table today, then I promise you I'll work as hard as I possibly can to make sure we can do that. But I think we ought to be able to do that.
Okay. I'd like to ask a couple of questions about
Sure.
Article 35, your proposal on the complete agreement and the past practice.
Okay?
I understand what you were doing, and there was a reason that we had included it within the management rights, because when we're dealing with a complete agreement, we're sitting down here, we're negotiating this contract, and we're agreeing to things. There's give and take on both sides with regard to the rights that are given to both parties. When we're talking about past practice and you're including it with the complete agreement article, my concern is that creates a major hole in the contract, and it kind of nullifies the complete agreement. My question to you is how does a past practice provision that you included here not nullify that complete agreement or help with what the complete agreement is meant to do?
I think that it ameliorates to some extent the complete agreement clause. But at the same time, what it does is it protects established practices, and it's our burden to prove the existence of an established practice. But as you know, past practice takes 2 forms. It takes the form of a practice that's used to interpret a provision of the contract. It also takes the form of a practice that is protected even though the contract is silent as to that practice. We have put it here to make sure that those types of practices, both types of practices, are protected. And I would throw your question back to you. Okay, I'm looking at page 57 of the police contract, which you have not proposed to change. It has an existing conditions provision, and it has a complete agreement provision. They're Article 18 and Article 19, Section B. And I would ask you, does Article 18, existing conditions, nullify the complete agreement clause that you have in your police contract?
I would like to point out that if you read the prevailing rights provision of the fire contract and the existing rights of the police contract, they're very different. With regard to the police contract, it's saying that each individual police officer, they will enjoy the working conditions, the hours, and the wages that they experience, that they have at the time of this contract. For instance, if they were, and I know this doesn't happen in the police department, but just for example, if they were to have voluntarily demoted or gotten some sort of some sort of approval to not be on a certain duty, then they won't lose that, even though the contract says now everybody has to do that duty, but they would continue to enjoy that particular right. So that kind of, it's much different when you look at the fire contract and the prevailing rights. It says any and all working conditions that are that are enjoyed by all employees will not be, I forget the exact language, but it's much different. So what you're talking about now is what has been the basis of a lot of these grievances that we have talked about, or that when management has decided to be more generous and allow a certain practice to happen because they were able to fund it, it was operationally okay, things like that. Whenever they have to pull back on it, they're forced to fight it every single time, you know. And I'm not talking about mandatory subjects. Of course, we have to negotiate on that. The management cannot unilaterally, change any of the things that we have negotiated upon, or that are mandatory subjects of bargaining. But I think it's different, and so they do have a complete agreement clause, but that says that is the complete agreement. So if an individual has a right, and in the police agreement, and they say, I'm maintaining this right, and now this contract's taking it away. Well, if they try to take it away, no, it's preserved. But it's not a global thing for the entire police department. It's not a tool to create an obstacle to the management of the department. And it has never been used like that in the police department. So I think it's very different. There's distinguishing characteristics of what you call a maintenance of standards provision, but it's an existing of standards. And the other problem is if we're putting this provision in there that says this is a complete agreement, and you didn't think that something was, and y'all didn't put something on the table that you thought needed to be negotiated, then you may claim that some sort of practice starts because of a management decision that wanted to allow it to be more generous, and then you're claiming now it's a right, yet you have not given up anything for that right. That right hasn't been negotiated.
Roxy, number one, the words used in the police contract and the fire contract are different, but they mean the same thing, and that's pretty clear. On March the 26th of this year in these negotiations, I offered you a maintenance of standards provision that was word for word identical to that contained in the police contract, and you rejected it.
The problem
And
is
you
that
said
the fire
you
union
wanted,
doesn't
wait, let me
understand
finish.
that.
And you said that you were more comfortable with the term past practice, and so I went to that. But if you think that the police can't use the existing conditions provision in the same way that the fire union has used the maintenance of standards provision, you're just wrong. And I will tell you that right now. That existing condition says no employee, that's no one in the entire police department, shall be unfavorably affected by the signing of this agreement as to wages, hours, or conditions of employment that he/she now enjoys, except as otherwise provided in this agreement. Now that's a maintenance of standards provision. You can call it existing conditions, but what's the difference between an existing condition and an existing standard? And you're agreeing to maintain both. I understand that the firefighters have used the maintenance of standards provision in their current contract in ways that the city felt were unjustified, and that the city, to my knowledge, has only yet arbitrated one maintenance of standards grievance and won it. And that case could have gone either way. The arbitrator saw it your way that day. A different arbitrator on a different day might have seen it our way. I don't know that that was unjustified, but what I will say is this, because the fire chief admitted on the stand in that case that yes, it was a practice that he had allowed to go on for some time, but it was contradicted by specific language in the contract that he pointed to, and he prevailed on that basis. And we're living with that. We live with that right now. But at the same time, you're asking an awful lot of this association to give up a prevailing right clause when we can look over at the police and see that they've got the same dadgum thing, and the only basis that I've heard you articulate for asking us to give it up, and at the same time agree to a complete agreement clause that we have never had in 40 years of contracts, is because you actually used the dadgum thing.
No, it's abused. Not that it was used, it was abused.
You saying it's abused, but yet you have settled some of those maintenance of standards grievances. And what I'm telling you is that to the extent that it has been, I'm not going to use the word abuse because I don't think that's a correct word, but to the extent that you feel it's been overused, we're looking at that. And, there is going to, at some point, we're going to have to improve the trust relationship that exists between the parties. And you and I both agree that. And, I've given you a lot of things in this contract that the city wanted that were important to the city. And I'm telling my guys, we got to trust them a little bit. And I'm asking you to do the same thing. And, if we continue to quote unquote abuse it, then I hope you'll call me up and say, they're at it again, and we'll take steps, to make sure that it's not abused. But you've got to understand that sometimes parties just got to agree to disagree. I mean, that's union management. It works best when we work together hand in glove, but we can't agree all the time. We wouldn't be doing our job. And you wouldn't be doing your job if you just let us take over and manage the department the way we see fit. And we understand that, believe it or not. But, there's always going to be that healthy tension. And has it gotten a little unhealthy? Yeah. Because there have been stresses placed on this department that I'm not blaming anybody for. But they were there and they existed. And you're taking steps to deal with them, but you're throwing out the baby with the bathwater at this point. And so I think the past practice language I've given you places limits on our use of past practice that are the types of limits that you think should be there so that it won't be abused or overused. And at the same time, I can't in good conscience tell my team, give them a complete agreement that they've never had before, let them put additional language in management, and give up maintenance of standards. It can't work that way. And if that's the price of getting a contract, it just may be too much. And I think we all agree that continued fighting is not in either party's interest, and it shouldn't happen. It won't happen if we just both agree that we got to compromise somewhat. But this is a big ticket item, and I'm not going to kid you and pretend that it's not.
Does the fire union believe? Let's talk about past practice for a little while, because it's happened before where the management has done things, made some decisions that were either more generous than the contract, or made management decisions that weren't in the contract, which created a benefit. They didn't take away, they gave to the firefighters. Does that mean that we're bound to it in perpetuity, but without having to defend it in a grievance or in a lawsuit?
At the point in time that something becomes an established past practice, then that means that it becomes a right that the firefighter holds that he or she could grieve under this contract. But it is our duty to...
And what are they paying for that? What is the city giving for that?
What is the city getting for that?
Yeah, what is the city getting for that?
You're getting a lot of additional language in your management rights provision that you seemed was very important to you.
That's a misrepresentation.
And you're getting...
We're clarifying what the management rights were already. We're telling you what our retained management rights were and are and currently have always been. And
why do you want to clarify that?
Because of the misunderstanding from the fire union in throwing a prevailing rights provision every time any kind of management decision was made.
And so what you're doing is you're strengthening the arguments that you feel you would have.
We already had those arguments. We just want to make it clear to the fire union.
And so
if we're going to make a clear and unambiguous contract, that's what we're here to do. And we're not buffering it up. It's what was already there on the management rights.
Okay, well, so was the maintenance of standards already there. And you're taking away a major right of the firefighters. And what are you giving them in return?
We've guaranteed them a contract.
I don't think that's going to be good enough at the end of the day.
Really,
we don't even need to have the last 5 sessions if you feel like you can't give way on this past practice. So if you can't, just tell us, and, you know, let's not beat our heads against the wall. I mean, if it's that important to you, then we just may need to fight. And fight we will.
Okay. Let me take your proposal and let me visit with my team and
Okay?
my clients.
Can we talk about our last proposal on EMS for a minute?
Actually, that was what I was going to ask right now.
Okay.
If we could talk a little bit about that. Which one is that, 33?
It is. And it's the one that we made at 1 p.m. We actually made two proposals
okay.
that day.
I have a 9
So
a.m.
don't,
pull up
yeah,
to 1 p.m.
1 p.m.
So 6:24 at 1 p.m.
Right.
Yes. Okay, you said you believe that we're really close on here.
Mhm.
My question is though that you're adding in a voluntary demotion for everybody. That's correct? That wasn't in the old contract.
Well, obviously firefighter ones can't voluntarily demote, but firefighters twos could, yeah, that's right.
But with firefighter ones, you're saying they can be removed from the ambulance rotation.
Right, after 8 years. But I think that's something that they enjoy right now. What I want to point out to you is Section 5. This allows the fire chief to declare a moratorium. Well, it does two things. Hang on a second, I've got to read. If you look, let's just take at the bottom of page 1, section 1B. The 8 years, we're giving you a 1-year moratorium, actually a little bit more than 1-year moratorium if we get this agreement done in July. We're giving you about a 14-month moratorium on anybody stepping down, okay? You'll see that phrase commencing on September 1, 2016. So that gives you 14 months from now to get these new people online. And you'll see that same phrase commencing on September 1, 2016 in each of the 8-year requirements. And then we've got a section 5 that even after that 1 year, if the fire chief can't obtain adequate staffing, he can declare up to a 6-month moratorium. Even after September 1st of 2016, he can declare a 6-month moratorium on those things to ensure additional staffing.
Now that,
So that's 14 months plus you can gain an additional 6 months at any time if it's truly necessary.
Now, on section 5, when you're talking about the moratorium, does that mean that for 6 months, people won't request for any kind of voluntary demotion, or does that put all the people who had voluntarily demoted back online?
It wouldn't put people who had voluntarily demoted prior to that time back online. If this grievance that went to arbitration, the chief said, I can't grant your request because if I do that, I don't have enough people. It would create a 6-month moratorium on people being able to step away from the service. So, but it wouldn't undo prior ones, okay? But, that's on top of the 14-month, essentially what's a 14-month moratorium right now.
And the reason, okay, we didn't have a per se voluntary demotion in the old contract, but we did have the 8-year minimum certification requirement for paramedic certification. Is that what you're basically trying to put into this contract? Is that why you're calling it a voluntary demotion? Because what we're moving to is to have a complement that will all have paramedic certification, with grandfathering, paramedic certification for their whole tenure, and that would be a condition of employment.
Mm-hmm. And which would mean, there are two things, paramedic certification on the one hand, and service on the ambulance on the other. You want everybody in the department to be encouraged to keep that paramedic certification because the fire units respond as first responders.
Right. That's right.
And that's really important. But service on the ambulance itself takes a toll. And so firefighters who have served for 8 consecutive years on the ambulance need to be able to get away from it. If you have adequate staffing, that's not going to be a problem. If you have another situation like you've had the last couple of years where for whatever reason you're not able to hire your short staff and it becomes a problem, in that situation the fire chief could declare a moratorium. Okay? And so that would give you some protection. We need a limit on that protection because, just as you don't want firefighters to abuse the privilege of stepping down, we don't want to abuse the privilege of declaring a moratorium. But, again, with the addition of 80 people, some of whom are already paramedic certified and others of whom are going to be getting it, I really think that your situation is going to ease greatly.
Now, on on firefighter ones who request to be removed from the ambulance rotation, does their pay stay the same? On C3?
I would think the answer to that is
because they can't like you said, they can't voluntarily demote. See, in the old contract, you had if you wanted to get off ambulance rotation, but you weren't in that voluntary demotion grandfather clause, which is only about 4 people now.
Mm-hmm.
Pursuant to the contract, if you wanted to basically get off the ambulance, I think you had to drop your patch. Is that right? Or drop your paramedic certification.
John? I don't know. I don't do ambulance.
Okay. Anybody know?
For those that covered, they could voluntarily demote, and they would give up their patch. Well, they could keep it if they wanted to.
Right. So they could keep it if they
Prior
wanted
to May of
to, or they could drop their patch, which would drop them back to a firefighter 1.
Well,
If
yeah.
you dropped your patch, it doesn't matter, does it?
No, the patch is not a condition. What they did is they could demote from firefighter 2. That's where the demotion comes into a firefighter 1.
But that was only for a very small group of people.
Prior to May 1985.
1980s, yeah.
That's the group that we're talking about, correct?
But if they wanted to get
And
off,
does their pay stay the same? No, because at that point.
Right, but that's not what I'm asking. What I'm asking now is that small group has now been expanded through your proposal. And my understanding is the reason that you're including that in your proposal is because of the requirement to maintain your certification. Well, now we have grandfathered y'all, the people currently here, to not have that permanent certification, as I recall from our last proposal. So stays the same as the old contract. My question, when you're adding, and then when you're adding the firefighter one that can request to get off of the ambulance, there's no provision in here.
Well, they're all losing money when when a
But they're still
firefighter two,
paramedics.
under our proposal, demotes, he does, because
And
he's
it usually
effectively
can go.
going down in one rank, so he will lose money.
From a firefighter one to a firefighter two, but what about a firefighter one that says, I'm no longer gonna be on the ambulance, and the chief has to say, okay?
Then they're gonna lose the assignment.
Yes, they also.
They're gonna lose you propose that they get $25 per shift assignment pay, obviously they lose that.
But what about, any of their base pay or anything? Do they go down a
They,
step?
they don't lose their base pay, but you know, I mean, y'all signed an MOU just a year ago that said firefighter ones could request off the ambulance rotation after a year. I mean, so all we're doing is continuing the practice that exists. We're not changing that. In fact, we're giving you a
But that's not what the
we're giving you a
contract-
14-month moratorium on that.
Right, but that's not what the contract held.
Well,
That was not in the contract.
you know, the grievance
And what I had-
settled a dispute about what the contract required. And y'all agreed, under the MOU, that here's how we're gonna interpret it. And you also put in that MOU that we can revisit this when we renegotiate the contract,
Right.
and we are.
And the intention of that settlement agreement, and it is clear in the drafts that were exchanged, that this was not to create a past practice issue. And I don't know what happened, because I wasn't around during that time, but there are drafts that went back and forth, and we talked, and it was made clear that one of the reason that we were going to deal with this, through that settlement agreement, was that one paragraph which wound up for some reason not being included in that final settlement agreement. But that was the intention of the city, the entire time.
I don't know what was the intention of the city, and I don't know about the versions that went back and forth, and so I can't really speak, you
And I
know,
understand that. I'm
to
just-
that. But what I can say is that you have honored that right for the past year. You've honored that right. I don't think it's been exercised very much. And whatever that right is, we're proposing to put a moratorium on it for 14 months. And so nobody's going to exercise that right in the first 14 months of this contract or until September 1st of 2016. And so that means you can be guaranteed that the people that you've got now, you keep for another 14 months just by agreeing to let us go back to the old way after that, and you still have an ability to declare a moratorium if you have a problem. Roxy, I
But
mean...
it's a very limited moratorium.
It is, if you
It's
want
very
to,
limited.
and I've said 6 months, if you want to say 8 months or something like that, make that as a counter. But I mean, we want some kind of acknowledgement that we're really working hard to try and get you the staffing that you need. And that doesn't seem to be forthcoming. I mean, y'all are just looking at this in terms of we're not getting exactly what we want.
No, I don't think that's true. I think our concern is there's issues that we're trying to deal with, and we just don't want to, with this new contract, create a position where those issues may be compounded or that it may be exaggerated. And so that's what we're looking, and that's what the concern is. Not that we're not getting what we want. What we're looking at is what will benefit the department as a whole and the firefighters as a whole. I'm really concerned that with the way that it's, extending this claimed past practice into a contractual right creates the ability for a lot of people to voluntarily demote, and ultimately a small pool of people being on the ambulance rotation. Now, I do recognize that you have established that moratorium, and that but it's only limited to 6 months as it's proposed. So that's what we're thinking. It's not because we're not getting what we want. Those are the valid concerns that we are considering in trying to figure out how to deal with the EMS.
I mean, you've got a problem right now, and you're addressing that in certain ways. You're hiring a bunch more people, and you're requiring them, and we're agreeing that you can require them to maintain paramedic for the duration of their time. and we're giving you a moratorium of about 14 months and the ability to declare other moratoriums if, there's a staffing crisis. And, obviously it's not my job to tell the city how to run its business, but if the city is, I think, forward thinking, they'll utilize that 14-month period and work with the union and try and address this whole issue of the way, the classifications work and what all that means. Because other departments are able to successfully staff their ambulances without having to force people to stay past their burnout point. But, I want y'all to understand that we too have a legitimate concern. Burnout is real. I mean, it is real. And I have done the PTSD cases and all that good stuff and seen people have meltdowns. And when you have a paramedic that's been there too long and they're tired and burnt out, you're not getting the quality of service that you and the citizens deserve. At the same time, I understand that there are going to be crises where you got to have staffing by hook or by crook. And I'm trying to do that for you here. But, to some extent, I feel like y'all are looking a gift horse in the mouth. And so I say, let's negotiate something in this contract that gets us past the crisis. You've got additional staffing coming on board, and let's utilize that time period to devise a more permanent system. We can open this contract anytime we want by mutual agreement, and I'm telling you that the very first thing we did when we started negotiating this contract was we said let's do what do you call it, IBB bargain. Let's get together and work out. Y'all didn't want to do that. You resisted that. So, okay, let's work out a solution that gets us past this immediate problem. The cavalry is coming, and so let's use that time period to work out, if this solution isn't ultimately a successful solution, to work out something better. I think you'll find that we'll meet you halfway on that. But for right now, this is a pretty daggum good proposal that we're making to you. It really, you may feel like it creates new rights because it places rights that were given in the MOU into the contract. But, as far as I'm concerned, that MOU is part of the contract. The old contract.
Okay. We will visit about that. And the moratorium is just for the requests. It wouldn't bring people back online. That was one of the main questions.
It wouldn't bring people. It would not bring people back online. Although, if you have people that are paramedic certified, in an emergency, a true emergency, I think all bets are off. And I would point out, if you look at the last section, that first sentence is an important one. The fire department must be able to adequately staff its ambulances at all times. I mean, we're understanding and agreeing to that statement.
Okay. Is there a limit? It doesn't have, if a moratorium is declared under this section, proposed section 5, it could be anywhere from a day or a week to 6 months. Is that right?
It could be up to 6 months, and if at the end of the 6 months there's you still got an emergency, I don't see anything in here that specifically precludes you from declaring a second moratorium.
Okay.
But I want to point out to you, I don't want to sell you a pig in a poke. If you declare 2 back-to-back moratoriums, you may well get a grievance over that, and be put to your proof about what is the emergency situation.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, if the only way to obtain staffing for ambulances is to declare a moratorium,
Okay.
there's recognition of that need in the contract.
I think that answers all my questions.
And I do want to point out too that if you remember that last sentence, if the chief thinks he's going to need to declare a moratorium, give the association some heads up and convene the LMR committee to consider, other things that could be done.
Mhm.
Make those people work.
All right, I think those are all the questions I have on that emergency medical services right now.
Okay.
Were there any other, let's see, EMS article, okay, Article 2, Article 35, I think that's it. So we'll go back and work on the information you requested and,
Please make me an
additional
Article
proposals.
38 proposal
Okay.
this afternoon. And we've been kind of ignoring the Deputy Chief, Assistant Chief article. I think we need to revisit that at some point.
Okay,
So we will go back and start looking at your supplemental pay proposal.
very good, okay.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I saw 622 with a rack or anything.
Okay, good afternoon. We have sent you a proposal on, UA 38, the Association Health and Benefit Trust. What we did, was we kept the Section 1 and Section 2, the trust creation and the indemnification is language we already agreed to. The only section at issue was Section 3, the city's payment to the trust. We had we presented to you this afternoon a proposal that we would pay the $150,000 to the Health and Benefits Trust without the escalator. And I just want to talk a little bit about what we understand the Firefighters Health and Benefit Trust to be. We understand that it's a trust that is governed by actual plan documents, and it has a board of trustees, and I believe there's even city representatives on that board, and there's communication with regard to how this trust works, and there are certain parameters and standards that are officially set by this particular trust. It's a governed trust. It has and it has certain rules it has to follow and how it disperses the money, as I understand it.
That's all correct.
Okay.
And we had sent you a counter. We'd proposed, since via escalators the amount has gone up a little bit over the years, we had proposed your language, but in lieu of the $150,000 that you proposed, we proposed $165,000.
Okay. And we're ready to tentatively agree to that proposal. And so I printed out the tentative agreement, printed out the copy that you've emailed me,
Okay.
and I'll go ahead and sign those right now. Today's the 7th, correct?
Right.
Okay.
Do we keep one of them and you?
Yes.
Better look at it.
Oh, okay.
Okay. And for tomorrow, we're also working on our proposals for UA, I believe it's 6 for the management rights.
Mhm.
We're working on the zipper clause and the past practice proposal. And we're also working on the emergency medical services proposal. We have not forgotten about the association right proposal. In fact, we're working on that. We may be able to have something tomorrow morning also on that.
Okay.
And let me see, which other outstanding? There was a couple more.
Management rights, association rights,
EMS.
overtime pay is an issue.
Oh, yes, overtime.
Deputy and assistant chiefs, EMS.
Okay, so we're working on all of those, and we'll be able to have some proposals for you in the morning.
Okay, very good.
Probably, since it's already 5 and we're having to gather some information, it may be about 10:30. You know, we won't be ready to meet right at 9:30, but possibly 10:30.
Okay, very good.
just to
And
let you
I'll
know.
by 10:30 at the very least, I'll have you a base wage and a supplemental pay proposal.
Okay, and then we can work from there.
Yeah.
If there's any information that you need, just email it to me and I'll start working on it as soon as I get the email. But I believe that we have provided you all the information that we requested by that last email.
That's right. I
Okay.
think my folks had thought there were more assistant city managers, but you've indicated there are just the 3.
Yes, there's only 3 city managers, because they
Assistant
used
city.
assistant city managers. There used to be 4, but one was created into a deputy city manager position,
Okay.
so.
Okay. Very good. We
Okay.
will see you guys tomorrow.
Okay, thank you.
Bye-bye. Guys, let's go back to the